Yes everyone, hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you get any value from the video, please like and subscribe. And if you've got any thoughts, comments, ideas, anything you'd like me to talk about in future videos, please leave in the comment section down below. So today I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience and my observations that I've had while doing the carnivore diet for the past year and a half. So I started in May last year, it's currently November. And I started doing the carnivore diet once I got diagnosed with bipolar cyclothymia because I believed it would help me with my mental health. So one other thing I should say before we get into this is take my advice at your own peril. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a nutritional expert, I'm just sharing my experience. A few things to consider. These are pros, these are cons, but these are just things that I've observed within myself and also that other people have mentioned to me as well. So the first thing to consider once you start doing the carnivore diet is you become much more sensitive to foods if you step away from a carnivorous diet. So what I mean by that, for example, if you eat strict carnivore for 2 months and then you eat some sugar, your reaction will be much stronger to it than if you'd never cut out the sugar in the first place. And this is a little bit of a con. So what I mean by a con is a negative. And so I've noticed, for example, I always realised when I ate gluten I would get tired. Now it's a little bit more, I get even more tired when I eat it. So it depends how you look at it. If you're doing this for the long term, then maybe it doesn't bother you. Also, I'm sure if you sort of introduce things back in slowly and consistently, you would start being less reactive. But it's just something to consider. And it makes sense, right? If you smoke weed every day, but then you decide to not smoke weed for a year, and then the first time you smoke weed again, you're going to get really high. It's kind of the same sort of thing. Your body is going to build up more sensitivity to these things that you're not typically ingesting. So just something to consider there. Another thing to consider, which again is a slight negative, is it can be a little bit challenging socially. It's difficult to stick to a really carnivorous diet when you go out eat in restaurants. And also something I've observed is some of your friends may not get it. This is something that I find a little bit challenging. It's like some of my friends don't really understand why I'm doing it and think I'm being stupid, but I guess this is where you've just got to stick to your own guns and stick with your tribe, as it were, and it just sort of comes with the territory. But that's something to just consider. I'm not a massive fan of eating out anyway. So it's not really a big deal for me. And when it comes to the social aspects, yeah, sure. But yeah, so it's just something to consider, really. It can be a little bit more challenging. And also at times it can get a little bit boring. When you're just constantly eating and eating meat, it can get a little bit tedious sometimes. But to be honest with you, I haven't really found that. I don't think I can ever get bored of steak. So these are just, some sort of cons to consider. Something else I wanted to address is your stool, your poo, because people tend to always talk about this a lot with the carnivore diet. Now, in my experience, nothing really changed. Some people talk about diarrhea. That's not something I experienced. What I did experience is not having to poo as much. So typically I poo 1 or 2 times a day. Then when I started really strict carnivore, that was purely meat, nothing else, I was pooing like once every 2 or 3 days. But I didn't have any constipation, I didn't have any diarrhea. Now I eat a little bit of greens and I would say my stomach and my bowel movements, they feel really healthy. And that's just my interpretation. So that's just something people always talk about, so I just thought I'd sort of share my experience. I hope it wasn't too vulgar for you. Another thing is, for me, a really big and interesting positive from doing the carnivore diet is your relationship to food changes. I think that a lot of people are actually just addicted to food. They're not really hungry. They just eat things without really thinking. And when you start doing the carnivore diet, you don't have cravings anymore. All that goes away when you become really strict. Now, like I said, I'm eating a little bit of greens at the moment, just because I feel for me it gives me a little bit of balance. Some leafy greens and an avocado every other day, sometimes some fermented food. But when you go strict with the carnivore diet, even if you're adding in some greens, you stop craving these chocolates and these crisps and all these foods that are really unhealthy for you. Because really, they're just an addiction. And it's quite interesting. And you start realizing what hunger really is. Are you hungry or are you just craving some food? to fill that empty space within you. And I've found it very interesting. For me, that's been the biggest takeaway, is your relationship with food changes and your cravings disappear. The other thing I would say is your energy becomes very stable and continuous. I used to always sleep during the day. Now, I never really get tired during the day. Mentally, I feel stable. My energy is stable. And overall, for me, it's a very positive experience. One thing I'm going to say, I've been getting like some inflammation in my body and also a tiny bit of psoriasis. And it all started about 6 months after changing to a carnivore diet, so I don't know if that's related, but like I said, in the last few months, I've started sort of I've been way more lax with it, and I think that might be causing the inflammation. But I'm going to be really strict for the next 2 weeks, see how that goes, and I'm also doing OMAD, 1 meal a day, because I've heard that's really good for inflammation, and I want to do that consistently for 2 weeks and see what impact it has, if any. But I just wanted to share that. Of course, I'm not a nutrition expert or a nutritionist, so take my advice as you will. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. As always, any thoughts, comments, please leave them down below. Have a cracking day, and I'll see you next time.